I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. I did not give you a recap last meeting because I actually attended the meeting remotely over Zoom because I was sick at home, and after the meeting I just didn't have it in me. So my apologies. You get this meeting's recap though. However, it is a significantly shorter meeting, so it's going to be a comparatively short recap. Tonight's Plano City Council meeting. In the preliminary open meeting, we first discussed extending a firefighter's, basically workman's comp. He was injured in the line of duty, and his recovery has had some ups and downs, and so we extended the workers' comp claim. Basically, it's all under government statute, but beyond the initial 1-year period, and we wish him all the best in speedy recovery. We had a discussion about our comments of public interest, which has been a running discussion for a couple of meetings now. And we talked about making sure that time limits were adhered to. We offer up to 3 minutes during comments of public interest. If there are many speakers, then we will typically abbreviate that 3-minute period somewhat. But we've got to make sure we adhere to this time standards for everybody. And I suggested that if we're going, normally we give people a customary few second extension to wrap up their thoughts gracefully. But if we're going to just say 3 minutes is up, you've had your time, then we should give them more warning. I suggested 20 seconds before the end of the 3 minutes so that they can come to a cogent close. And so that's what we started doing. Then we discussed a price escalation policy. So at the last meeting, one of the consent agenda items was an amendment with AT&T, which is basically to allow them to purchase use of our rights of way for another 10 years for about $500,000 roughly, is a little more than. But the reason we discussed this last meeting and it got tabled, by the way, it came up at tonight's meeting as well, and we've tabled it again, is because it contained provisions for 2 additional price extensions of 10 years each. So we're talking 30 years down the line with only a 3% increase. That's not 3% per year, that's 3% for 10 years, which is a hair under 0.3% per year. When you factor in the compounding interest, even annually compounded interest. So we tabled that to say, if we're forecasting something, what you're going to pay in 20 years' time, and for the next 30 years, I'm not comfortable, and this is what I said tonight, I'm not comfortable telling you now what something will cost in 20 years, especially in the current inflationary environment. So what we decided to do was, and this was a topic that Councilman Rigadelli put on the agenda, which I seconded, was to have a fuller discussion. The thing with AT&T was just a catalyst, but have a fuller discussion about building in automatic price escalations into our contracts. So if we're talking about something's going to cost more next year than this year, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because current inflationary environment accepted, that's not a tremendous lead time for changes in economic factors. But 10 years is, 20 years definitely is. So we're going to come back and we're going to have a broader policy discussion about price escalators in contracts. And that could have many ramifications, not just right-of-way usage and purchases, but various contracts. So that's something that justifiably has to be thought through more fully, but that we need to tackle appropriately. And lastly, I put an item in the preliminary open, I put an item for a future agenda to have a pretty broad discussion about our property standards and the enforcement. So since I was elected 3 years ago by you good people, thank you again, there have been a number of concerns brought to my attention regarding property standards. One of them regards the externalities that occur when, say, there's a rat infestation. You can treat your own home for rats all you want, but if they keep breeding next door, they're going to keep being a problem. So what happens when one property owner creates or contributes to a circumstance that is negatively impacting the other property owners. The line has to be drawn somewhere where somebody's property rights end and the other person's begin. Typically, that's at the actual property line. That line is the actual property line. But when there are these external factors that don't respect property lines and don't know property lines, what do we actually do to tackle that? Another is about the evolutionary nature of ordinances. So we had property standards decades ago, and we've made periodic adjustments to them as the city has evolved and developed. A good example of this is our noise ordinance. This has come up every year for past 4 or 5 years, and we've made multiple modifications to our noise ordinance because the nature of the city has changed considerably over the past several decades. And what suited the city back in 1978 no longer applies today in 2022. And so we bring those kinds of things current. And so when we do take a piecemeal approach to updating this property standard or that property standard, they may come out of alignment. I don't necessarily think any of them are actually contradictory, but they might cause questions and confusion. And the third thing is regarding equal enforcement. So I was given to understand shortly after I was elected that we operate on a complaint-driven property standards approach, that we wait for people to actually complain. And then I learned about a year later, well, no, that's not actually true. We do a lot of proactive enforcement. So how is that conducted? Are we applying it equally? What are the circumstances involved in different property standards violations? So City Manager Israelson actually suggested that a ride-along with neighborhood services crew would be beneficial. I fully agree, so I plan on doing that, in addition to ride-alongs with police and fire. So then we moved into the regular meeting. We did not actually have any items for individual consideration on today's meeting. We did start out recognizing the Plano West state wrestling champions. So we got to do this last year as well. Plano West has an awesome wrestling team. I myself wrestled in high school, so this is a little bit of a nostalgic experience for me, and I appreciate it. So Brooke Jada was the runner-up in female wrestling, and Farid Mubarak was the state wrestling champion in his category. So congratulations to both of you. We then moved into comments of public interest. Well, we did have one of the usual suspects in terms of the people who have come and putting on their bits at the past several council meetings. And then we had a lot of newcomers to open mic night. I will say that for all of you, if you want to be showcased on Tucker Carlson like Alex Stein was, you really got to step up your game. We did have some regulars as well who actually bring concerns related to Plano City Council every meeting, and those, I gotta say, I don't mind. Whether or not we ever move forward in the direction that you want, the ability for citizens to petition the government for redress of grievances is sacred in our Constitution and must be protected. And then we had a resident who was concerned about short-term rentals. This has also been something that is specifically a short-term rental behind his house. This is something that has come up also every year that I've been on council, and the increasing issue with short-term rentals has a lot of people concerned. These are often let out as party houses and rented as party houses. Council has started to take the approach that if they are not actually causing any issues which are already covered under ordinance, then nobody should care. So other than seeing unfamiliar vehicles and not knowing your neighbors, if they're short-term renters, if the problems that accompany them, like noise issues, marijuana, etc., shootings, that's something we don't want in our city, then I don't think anybody would really care that much, but they do come with those problems. And so we've taken the approach of looking at ways to hold the property owners accountable, even if they live in other states, and shutting down their laissez-faire habit of letting their houses out to the highest bidder. But that is a concern, and the gentleman who spoke brought several people, presumably not just in his neighborhood, but around the area, to voice their concerns as well, and to show that they have a vested interest in this matter. And then lastly, we pulled off of the consent agenda the item of the aforementioned AT&T right-of-way purchase, and we tabled that again pending the conversation about a policy approach to the price escalations. That was a very unglamorous city council meeting, but that's what we did, and oftentimes this is an unglamorous job, but I'm privileged to be able to do it for you. Thank you very much. I'm Shelby Williams of Plano City Council. Good night. God bless.